Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's our host for this week, Russell Martin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am one of your hosts, Russell Martin. Your other host is Brent Aiken. And if you've been listening each and every week, you know that we alternate and we've kind of gone to this new video format. So this is kind of fun and daunting at the same time. But this week we are doing a new episode and we have James Daniel. Did I mess it up? I messed it up already. Like we're a minute in. I probably won't edit it either. I'll just leave it in there. James Daniel Schopp. And so I have known James just from TikTok and not really seeing him, but seeing his students. And so something that struck me about that was seeing him doing games and stuff and utilizing games and also utilizing TikTok for that. So before we get to that interview, I want to remind you, if you are not subscribed already, go and click like and subscribe and all those things that they tell you to do. And you can also follow us at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And check out Student Ministry Conversations, where any of the links that James Daniel shares, Mr. Schopp shares, we will put into those links, any ideas or things like that, so that way you have reference. But also, we will have a transcript of this available as well. And so we began to do that with season 2, so make sure and check out those. But now we're going to get back to the point at hand. And so James Daniel, can you tell us about you, how you got to where you are, what you are doing? You can go as deep or as fast or as in depth as you want. Remember, we only have an hour and we want to talk about games. So other than that, the floor is all yours.
Sounds good. Well, I'm James Daniel Schopp, and you're not the first person to mess up the name, I can assure you, and you won't be the last. I just started doing youth ministry. It was probably about 4 years ago. I was 22 years old, and really it was at a church camp, a youth camp, when I was in my teens that I felt the call into ministry, and I submitted at camp that I would follow through with that commitment to Christ to go into ministry. But what I ended up doing shortly after making that commitment is putting it on the back burner and basically telling God, I'll serve you when I'm ready. Even though I know that you've called me to serve, I'm going to serve when I'm ready. And I had this idea in my head that, maybe when I have a family later on in life, when I'm 30 plus years old, I'll teach a Sunday school class. Like that's the ministry idea that I pretty much was trying to box God in, but God had a lot bigger plans for me. And my sister knew that I'd had that calling because I talked to my family with it. And she told me about Sandy Creek Church and they needed a youth minister. And I told her, I said, man, you're crazy. I mean, who lets a 22-year-old come in there and be the youth ministry? And she said, well, just call and, maybe figure out something. I just know that you would love it, because I would always help at our church, teaching and subbing for their Sunday school classes. And I called the church and got on the phone with the pastor. We talked for about an hour, and then I, went through the interview process. And for whatever reason, the church was crazy enough to let me be a part, to be their youth minister. And man, it has been an absolute blessing to be in the center of God's perfect will. I mean, the abundant Christian life is very much possible whenever you submit yourself to Christ. And the way that He's worked and moved through someone who definitely doesn't have all the answers, who didn't have all the education and background, just getting to see God increase has really been a blessing, and just getting to love on the kids. But that's kind of a very brief way. I didn't want to spend all the time. Like you said, I'm kind of like a youth in that regards. You got to get to the games. I know we're going to be talking about games later, so I don't want to mess up game time. But that was how I got my call, and it has been an absolute blessing. So I'll be making 4 years this October, and I can't think of any time I've ever dredged going to church. I have absolutely loved every single time meeting with these kids, and I guess that's the best little background I can give you.
So you have family now? Are you single, or are you? So
I'm actually single, and so the joke with my youth is that they are all the children that I have right now, and they seem to embrace that. I think they're definitely very protective in regards to who I talk to and who I don't talk to, which is definitely appreciated, because I know that means they definitely love me and stuff. And but hopefully one day I'll have my own family, and then they can be a part of the youth group.
And you're also bivocational, we were talking about before.
Yes, that's true. So actually, I'm bivocational, so I part-time work at the church, but it's really not part-time. I pretty much spend more time there than I do with my 40-hour job. I work for the state as a Louisiana legislative auditor, and I really enjoy that job too. I actually brought it up in my interview. That was one of the things that I told them in my interview. I said, look, I don't plan on stopping the youth ministry, and they were one of the few, I guess, employers that said, no, you keep doing what you're doing. We see what you're doing. We love it. We want you to continue doing that. This is the place for you. And I can't thank them enough for letting me get to do both like that.
Awesome. And for our listeners, what's nice about James Daniel coming here is that last week you should have heard an interview that Brent did talking about singleness in youth ministry. And how to be a youth minister as, being single, and the things to watch out for, and the blessings, and also the pitfalls, and the fishbowl that's around you, and all those things. And then also, if you go back 2 weeks, episode 56, I believe, we talked about bivocational youth ministry. And so I encourage anybody, if you want to know more about any of those topics, go back and listen to those podcasts. But I mentioned that I found you on TikTok. And so I am on there, but not near as popular as you are with your games. So first, tell us though, kind of, why did you everybody does games, everybody, does this. Why did you decide, hey, we're going to do this on TikTok? Because when I watch, it's not like you talking a whole lot. Mostly it's your games. So tell us a little bit about why y'all decided to do that, how your church either responds, or do you get any pushback or anything like that? And maybe what are some of the benefits that you have reaped from doing that? So one of the things I want to ask you is about games. Like, I know that you can be at a church, and some people are like, well, why don't we should just do Bible study? We should just sit down and have the kids go. So what is the reason for the games and fun in youth ministry?
Oh yeah. So one of the best ways that I like to explain why games are so important for youth and youth ministry is it's typically during the game time and the less serious times that the relationships and the walls that these kids have come tumbling down. Mm-hmm. They get to see you in a more natural state. They get to see you in an environment where people are letting loose. And there's all of a sudden, without anything extraordinary happening, they're a part of a team immediately. So there's already camaraderie when you do get to play these games. And I have just seen that whenever you, take them seriously in regards to what they enjoy. And I know we play games on TikTok a lot, and you see a lot of the games, but you also see probably some of the youth at their sporting events, getting to be involved in their games that they play, and just getting to let them know that, you want a real relationship with them, which in turn, which is the crazy part, is whenever you go to teach and when you open up the Word of God, the same kids that, maybe at the very beginning, when they first started coming to the youth group, were bored, didn't really want to engage. But now all of a sudden, when they realize that you cared about what they like, they start listening. They start diving in. They're thinking, man, this guy, he's serious about me. He wants a real relationship with me. And he's telling me that there's a God who wants a real relationship with me. And I know that's real because of what he's shown. It's just been a great dynamic because, like you said, you do get some pushback sometimes with games. You get the idea, maybe that's all you do. And I can assure you, when speaking with my youth and at our church, that's definitely not the only thing we do. We just have found that whenever you do put just as much an emphasis on the games as you do the Word of God, as you do the fellowshipping, it just seems to be a perfect picture. And it's just been a absolute blast with that, because they do pay attention very, very well. And it's usually before or after game time when they get to see you let loose, and they come to find out that you're just a regular person. Yeah. You're actually not sometimes the people in ministry, they can kind of get labeled as the oddballs, and then all of a sudden you play a sport with them and they're like, wait, you can throw a frisbee? I can do the same things you can do. So that's where a lot of the games came into play, and the kids have just absolutely loved it. And for the longest time, we actually didn't have a gym, and we didn't really have an area to play because the field, we were under construction. And so we had to come up with a lot of the goofy games that you see on TikTok. And those are a lot of time are the games that seem to go most viral. And they were just, made up games in a room, but these kids just enjoyed being with each other, because I guess when you start playing games, the way that it seems to happen is they build relationships that they didn't realize that was happening while they were playing the games. And these kids now, who maybe initially were dropped off at church because mom made them, are now telling mom, hey, bring me to church early. I have to be there. That has been the biggest blessing for sure, is that change of narrative. Instead of me having to go or the kids having to go to church, kids wanting to go, and then you see the parents get involved shortly after too.
Well, I'm gonna restate a question, and because you went with the game direction on that, which is great. And then I do want to go back and talk a little bit about is there any struggles or anything from like you taking TikTok specifically? Like, is there any, like, why did you choose to put those things up on, why did you choose that as a venue for broadcasting?
Well, I guess really the way that I found it rooted, I guess, in scripture is a lot of times whenever we open up the word of God and we look through the gospels, the way that Jesus treated individuals, he found a way to get on their level. He found a way to find that common ground, to meet them exactly where they were at. And what I found with youth, games is one of those areas where you can meet a kid where they're at, no matter what they're going through, whether their home life is good, bad, struggling, whether school's struggling, all of a sudden when you play a game, it seems like everything else seems to fade away. And so that was kind of like the biblical background of why we decided that games need to be important, is we realized that Jesus made the things of the people important. We were going to do the same thing. He sat down with sinners. He fellowshiped with them. Let's find a way to fellowship with these youth, because a youth's not going to be as excited if you invite them to your house for dinner. But if you say we're going to play dodgeball, you're going to have 40 youth just show up just for a dodgeball game initially. So that was the reasoning for why we decided to do the games. But to actually, I guess, to choose the TikTok platform, really, it started off, I want to say, somewhat of a joke, because I had a couple of my youth and even my cousin was saying like, oh, there's no way you're going to go viral. And I told them, look, I'm not trying to go viral. I said, I'm just doing this for the kids, and as I was posting it, and I actually made a joke to some of my youth. I said, look, I'm going to break the TikTok algorithm, and acting like I had some idea with it. And I had no idea. I was just, my idea of breaking the algorithm was post continually. Like you said, with your podcast, y'all committed to 20 episodes. Well, I committed to posting every day on TikTok, and, lo and behold, it just started happening. A couple of videos started to get hits, and it was in regards to a lot of the different games that we were playing, because if there's one thing that seems to stick out on TikTok, and that's when a youth group plays a game, because they seem to have that perfect balance of competitiveness, yet, friendliness, like kindness. It's just been cool. So that's why we chose TikTok. It was kind of a little bit of a joke, but at the same time, I knew that it was a platform that the kids would relate to. If you would have told me that we would end up being as viral as we were or are today, I probably would have never thought it, because I initially just did it for the kids. As you could say, the TikTok account, you never really see much of me. You pretty much just see the kids, or my leaders, or my helpers on there. So that's why we chose TikTok. Now we're on Instagram, but I don't share my Instagram as much because I was scared it was going to go viral. So that's actually why I don't. I told my youth, I said, look, I'm gonna try my best to keep the Instagram and TikTok separate, because I didn't want them to lose their individual specialness. Because I always tell them that obviously I love them all, but I very muchly love them each. Meaning, on an individual level, the way that I love these youth, it has to be individual. Otherwise, it's just going to be washed away. So I told them with the Instagram, that's more of me, loving you each. Like, I'm not just opening it up just to go viral or anything. Like, that's me being more personal with you guys. And I said, the TikTok, I said, I didn't plan on it, but that's just where it's going to be. But to try my best to keep that difference, I just don't share the Instagram, I guess, tag. But I mean, I think it was ESPN one time posted on Instagram, and they tagged our account, and then we couldn't help that. But we still did a good job with it. But that's the reason why we chose TikTok. It wasn't any specific reason, but there is a reason why we keep some separate and some not. Yeah.
Well, and that Sammy Kelly is another episode we did, and she talked about TikTok and using that, and specific reasons and ways. And if you're interested more in that, it's a great episode. Jessica Geiger is another one that we found through TikTok, and she talks about pouring into students and helping them to see their calling. But she's somebody else who is utilized. And so I think eventually we'll do a post or something like that as like episodes we found on TikTok and for that. So, but I do like how you're using that. You kind of have the public face. It's almost like a Facebook page versus a Facebook group, but you're using TikTok kind of as the public, here's who we are. And your Instagram is kind of like hey, this is our conversation. This is us within that. So Do you have a game fail story? I know that we all do games, and there's always those games that we just like,
Oh.
this was awful. And you don't have to share your worst failure because, you go, but help keep us humble because, when we see the games online, it's always like just like everybody else, it's the best of the best or whatever.
Right.
So help us know that we are just like everybody else when we lead games. And do you have any game fails or funny stories you want to share from games gone wrong?
Most definitely. I had one, I can specifically always go back to it. It was one of those time periods where we didn't have access to our gym and we had construction outside. So we were stuck within our youth room, and it was during Christmas time. And I had this great idea of doing one of those candy cane pickup games. You see them all the time where, you put them in their mouth and they're picking up objects with the candy canes. Well, again, I was early on in my youth ministry. I probably only been there 6 months. And as I was handing out these candy canes to the individuals, because we probably had I would probably say at that night, maybe about 40 or 50 youth in the room. I was handing them out to each kid and I was going down the road. Well, by the time I got to the 40th kid handing out their candy cane, I turned back around and kids 1 through 10 have already munched down their candy canes because I didn't tell them we were playing a game with them. So that was definitely my biggest fail because I guess I didn't tell the kids to not eat the candy canes before they started. So unfortunately, that was a failure on my part of not telling the kids that you're going to need the candy canes for a game because I also only bought enough candy canes for one per kid. So that was definitely my failures in regards to not properly planning and also not properly letting the kids know what the game was about. And one of the ways, I guess, like you said, it was very humbling. It was one of those moments where you're like, man, I guess I just didn't think about it. But going forward, a lot of times now when we go to play a game in the gym or outside, when we're meeting in the youth room before, is typically when I tell them what the game is going to be. I tell them the instructions. And it's usually in that setting when it's a more, I guess, secluded and not an open setting, they tend to listen better. Because if you try to explain instructions when you're down in the gym to a new game or you're out in the field to a new game, you always have a kid who found it, which is crazy. I mean, obviously, this. Kids find balls if you leave them in the gym. It doesn't matter where you put them,
Yep.
They'll find a ball. So before you know it, you're explaining a game and some kid's shooting a basketball and it's just frustrating. And sometimes you just wish, oh man, I hope I put all the balls away. So that was another thing I learned. Make sure you put up the balls before you explain games. So that was my two failures is the candy canes and making sure that I put up those balls before I try and explain a game. But it was a learning curve.
And you made me think when you were talking about that. So what are some of your specific things that you look for when you are planning a game? Or what are some of the questions you ask yourself when you're going, hey, there's a night coming up, we're going to do games. What are some of the things you consider?
There's really a couple of things that go into thought. And one is making sure that it's a game that pretty much everybody can play. I don't think it's really that fair to just make a game and you realize that only a couple of the individuals would want to play it, or, versus playing a game that, maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the older kids wouldn't want to play it, but the younger ones want. So it's kind of like finding that balance. And one of the things that I've tried to do to mitigate those struggles is actually kind of give the youth a choice of what game to pick. So usually I'll give them 2 options or 3 options. And at the same time, I'll be properly prepared for any one of those games that are being played. But usually once there's some sort of a vote, and that can either be done by an Instagram poll or right before when we're in the youth room, typically when you get a group to vote on one, whether they did or didn't want to play the game, they go ahead and do it because they know, hey, look, we all voted on it. This is fair. This is what the group wants to play. And they typically go play the game. So that's one of the things that definitely comes into thought whenever it comes to choosing a game. The other thing has to do with making sure I don't choose a game too competitive, because I have had a lot of different situations where if you choose a game that can end up being somewhat too physical, you have a little bit of an issue, because for some reason, when you play youth group games, it's World Series, Game 7. I don't know how it happens, but
ratchets up there.
It's crazy how quick it goes. And so definitely I try not to choose too competitive games. And thirdly, I just like to choose games where they have to communicate with their teammates. I want, that individual who's coming to youth group and it's one of their first few times, that the game that they're playing, their teammates are explaining it to them. They're treating them as if they're a teammate. They need them to win, all these different types of things that just easily encapsulates an immediate relationship. And it's simply just because you started playing a game. And I think even looking back, whenever we do like senior recognitions and we get their favorite memories, it's crazy the amount of times it was a simple game that later on down the road was the pinnacle point in these these youth's lives. And they were like, it was at that point I realized this is the place where I need to be. This is the place where God was working. These people want a relationship with me. They didn't just want me there as a number, as just a person who showed up. They really did enjoy me being there. So that's one of the main reasons, I guess, for choosing.
And that was something that I noticed playing games. And we play, whether it's volleyball or scatterball or outdoor, whatever, is you have like that seventh grader who's just there, but they're on the team with the senior, and the senior needs the seventh graders to succeed. Right. And all of a sudden they're friends. Like they could have been not known each other, but they're like, hey, you kid with the red hair, here's the ball, or whatever like that. And so that's the connection that they're going to have. Right. And that's a connection that they're always going to have. And the next time they choose games, like, hey, he was pretty cool. Why don't you come over here? Yeah. And so it gets those age groups kind of working together, gets new, especially if you pick the right game, you get those specific age groups and kids who aren't used to, all of a sudden they're on the same dodgeball team. And so we play scatterball, which is one where it's almost like, I don't know if you played it, but dodgeball, but everybody's against each other. Oh yeah. Kind of all working, and it never ends. You get down to like 5 and you say, all right, everybody in, and they go again. And so we use that kind of like an end of the night kind of game when parents are picking up, because you don't have to worry about sides or anything like that. But it's funny to watch these kids all of a sudden work together, and they're pulling other kids in on their game, and no teams. They're trying to get everybody out. Sure. And then you mentioned the competitive, and I had 2 students. They're pastors' kids, and they're both in college now, but they will tell you this was true. And I never could decide whether to put them on the same team, opposite teams. Because on the same team, they would fight over how it was supposed to go, or who missed the ball, or who did what. And on opposite teams, they were like at each other, like loved each other, but they were at each other. Oh, yeah. And so there's something to be wise to choose, how you do sides. How do you divide up? That's something that people ask all the time, is how do you divide up if you have a 2-sided game, like a team on team? So what are some of your best ways to divide up people for games like that?
So we've actually, one of the things I think is cool and a little bit different about what we do at our church is, even whenever the individuals come to youth group before there's game time, a lot of times, like even when they're coming up into the room to hear the lesson, we go ahead and they're already split up into 2 teams. And so every week we're competing. So, we had a couple of different themes. I think one of them was, I believe it was Battle of the Brothers. So what we did is the teams where, if you had a sibling on there, you would separate, but when you went into the youth room, you were already on a team, it was, let's say the Knights and the Cavaliers, something like that. Mm. So throughout the night, when you're in the room, you could get positive points for answering trivia, for giving words of wisdom, which our words of wisdom was simply them sharing to the group how God has been working in their life. And that has been a blessing, because, you have kids go up there and they speak out, and, what used to be something that was very hard to do in public or at their schools, they're finding themselves do it in a youth group, and, they're getting a little bit more confident. So whenever they go into the public settings, it's just like sharing words of wisdom. And so when you have those 2 teams, they're competing with scripture memory. And also when it comes to the Bible lesson, since they're on teams, we've also made a thing where, like, we if you don't want to be a distraction, that's obvious a thing. And, you don't want to always be going up to the bathroom. And so what I tell them to do is the same thing with the game time. We're very serious. I'm going to get straight to the point. I'm going to get real with you guys. I'm not going to fluff it up. I'm not trying to hit a minute mark. But what they do, since they're on teams, you could also get negative points for being disruptive. So all of a sudden, these parents who were school teachers, they come walking in on youth night and they're like, what are you doing? Like, why are these? And I said, it's because if they will get negative points, and these kids are just paying attention so well, they want to do great. And like you said, they'll have a 7th grader and they are rooting for the 7th grader to do well in the game or in the trivia or in the scripture memory, because they're a part of their team, and they're immediately becoming friends. And it's almost like an older brother, younger brother relationship. So when it comes to, I guess, splitting up the teams, like you initially said, it really just boils down to finding a good blend of the age groups. I've never seen a benefit of having, the older kids versus the younger kids. I've always seen the best when you have a variety. So whenever I go to split the teams, I take a list of the names, I look at them and I see their ages. And then I just start trying to spread them out. Obviously you'll find a couple of people, who have their, their diehard friend, or, they're the person that they're not going to separate from. I try my best to keep them together. But a lot of times, just the way that I separate them is simply just scattering out the ages. And usually I don't like it to have them, schoolyard pick for things like that. Uh-huh. Because, I don't want a kid to feel like last pick kind of deal. But that's typically how I do it. I try to spread it out typically with the age groups. And if you have the older, this is the only thing that I've definitely found out over these past couple of years. When you have your older aged youth who are really buying into the fact of investing in others when they come to youth group, it makes the world of a difference. So all of a sudden, these kids who come in, it's almost like a mentality. When you first start coming to youth group, it's almost like, what can this youth group offer me? And then all of a sudden, when you start maturing in your individual walk with the Lord, the mindset changes as, although I'm still gaining on an individual level what God has for me, I'm also seeking out ways that I can be pouring into others the same way that God's pouring into me, because my cup is overflowing. My tree is full of fruit and I'm ready to share it out. I want other people to try. So it's been cool to see when those older kids, their cup is overflowing and they're pouring into these younger. And so that's why I try my best when mixing the teams to have a couple older, and they and it's almost like a funnel. It funnels all the way down. And you'll have some rare occasions where you'll have some of the younger ones. They're the leaders, they're the ones who are on fire for the Lord. And when these older people may be struggling in life or in school, it's these younger ones that say, okay, you're dropping the torch. Well, I'm right here and I'm carrying it forward too. Like, that's been the cool thing. It's almost like the torch is the best way I can explain it. You have a torch that's being ran, but when you have these teams and these groups, once an individual is struggling in their walk with the Lord, there's someone right behind them to grab that torch and then carry them that same way. So that's my methodology for choosing teams.
and we so I remember using something similar, because there's a difference between if you can pick those early, even if it's just a game night, if you can pick those early versus on the gym floor trying to do it.
Right.
We would do like it was just the whole night was just competitions. So it was tournament night is what we called it. So we had ping pong tournament, we had because we had several game like boards or carpet ball, shuffleboard, things like that. We would do a Mario Kart tournament. And so we did all these, but when they came in, they got a band, like a paper band or a piece of string or whatever like that, that designated them for their team. And so it was already done. And I'm sure that some of them switched. I'm sure some of them figured out what we were using that night and brought their own. And I didn't worry about that. But for the majority, they were able to go, and then they signed up. So I said, hey, if you want to sign up for the Gaga Ball tournament, sign up here. And we made sure we had enough of each team. So they were competing individually. They were also competing as a team, but it made a big difference having them when they came in to sign up and to divide them into teams. So that way they have time to get used to it, instead of you're numbering off and they're switching to make sure they get with the right person. And then you're fighting with those. Now, one of the things I did discover is you will have some of those who can't play the game for whatever reason. It's a health or something like that, or they're just not feeling that night. And sometimes you can push them a little bit and get them involved. But what are some of the things that you do with them if they're not going to play? You just leave them on side and say, y'all miss out on everything? Or do you have anything that you maybe give them some responsibilities or allow them to help in some way?
Oh yeah. Well, that is definitely I feel like that's a difficult issue that a lot of youth ministers have, because it's kind of like, at what point do you continually, just do things specifically for the ones that aren't doing it, or do you just spend all your energy on the ones who are involved? It's a hard balance. I guess the way that I've found to deal with it is make sure that my events throughout the year, and we do a lot of events, it's not just come on Wednesday night, it's, they're ball games, what they do. That can mean a play, that can mean a musical recital, that can mean just showing up for an award they get at school, whatever it ends up being, is finding whatever that individual child's niche is and jumping on that, And so I think when it comes to how do you find the ones that aren't really playing the games, sometimes, like you said, it can be in regards to physically, can they play the game? And so, I won't sit there and say, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to play this game because, we want everyone to play, and kind of exclude them, even though you're including them. So typically what I do is, you just take a note of certain games that maybe a kid can or can't play. And it might just be on occasion, or it might be the next Wednesday, you're playing a game that might be more strategy based, or it might be more knowledge based. And before you know it, you have just that right element of athleticism, physical, but then you also have the mind aspect. You all of a sudden you throw that element in, and almost any game you play that has a physical element, you can add a mindset element to it, or a strategy element. And then all of a sudden that kid who couldn't play, based off of maybe something physical, is all of a sudden involved in the game because you added a new element to the game, and no one else even noticed that you did so. They didn't. I've never had a kid come up to me like, "Oh, you did that because of so and so." I don't know. I don't know how they haven't picked up on some of that type of stuff, but but it's just because you added that element and you didn't exclude them saying, oh, we're playing this game because we want him to play. You do what you normally do and you just add an extra element to it that, it could be something, goofy, silly, but, all of a sudden they're involved and it's been a good thing. But again, sometimes it may not be the best way to just play a game for that individual. You know what I'm saying? So like if you have a bunch of people and they're wanting to play dodgeball, and let's say you have an individual that can't play dodgeball, that doesn't mean you don't play dodgeball. What that means is maybe when the kids are playing dodgeball, you're going and engaging with the individual who can't play dodgeball, and you reinforce to them, oh, hey, by the way, what's going on with your life? Where are you working at? What days are your shift this week? Because I'm going to come by and get a dinner from you, just whatever it ends up being. That's the way that I found to, I guess, include everybody, because you can't also do that. You can't also never play dodgeball. That's kind of like that might end up being a sin. I don't know. I need to reread that this morning, but I don't know. So I don't know if that would be the best move. But I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said early on. It's making sure that you're loving these youth on an individual level. You can't just generically say you love your youth group. You have to individually say, I love you. And these are the reasons why. It's because I'm showing up when you're asking me to. It's because I'm praying for you. It's because I am just doing everything that God has already done to me. He has shown me. That is the only reason that I'm showing you and extending you that love. And that's one of the ways that you can do it. Exactly the question that you asked.
And I think, some of the things, what I gathered from what you said was just being intentional to find some way to include them, whether that is, I know one of the things we would do is I would say, hey, here's the camera. Here's my cell phone, go take pictures and videos, or would you keep score? Or would you be I know you can't run because your leg's in the cast, but you can watch the line and make sure nobody crosses it. And so you gave them some sort of purpose within, or could you help serve snacks or do something? And a lot of times they really, I had some kids who, they were older and they were like, we've done the games. Like we know the games, we know the stuff. But can we help? And they're setting up, they're planning the games, they actually started doing and choosing games or they would make sure on a night where we did a lot of games, like a lot of active games, like a minute to win at night or something like that. They would have all the stuff set up on the stage. They are way more organized than I am. And I would say, hey, we're ready for the next game. And they would move the stuff out and get it set up. And, or my assistant would be there and they would be helping them. And so they created relationships whenever, that seventh grader is not going to get out and play the gross yucky game, but they'll make sure everything's put together, or they will make sure that pictures get taken or whatever like that. And then, like you said, I like what you said too, is like, notice maybe something that they didn't play this because of this. Well, what is a game that they would play? And let's pick one the next time or the next time and say, hey, we're playing this. We did, when Trivia Crack was a big deal, we did a live version of Trivia Crack. We had all these trivia games and they spun the wheel and they did that. And so that was a way that so they could participate. Kahoot games or trivia nights or things like that. So, well, I don't want to go through the whole conversation and not get some specifics, because I know there's a youth leader who will listen to this on Thursday or Friday, and Sunday is coming up, and they're like, I don't have any games. So I said 3. If you have more or less, that's fine. But first of all, I'm thinking of 3 quick, easy. And I'll share some with you in case you haven't heard those too. 3 quick, easy, no prep, no prop, what I call no prep, no prop games. What are some of those things? You have a group, and I would say, something that could be anywhere between 10 and 50 kids or something like that. But so not like a huge group, but not like, doesn't necessarily have to be small. So what are 3 or so games that you would share and explain them clearly so that we can take them and steal them and do them on Sunday?
It sounds good. A game that is usually a go-to, and you've probably seen it on TikTok, it's whenever you have 2 lines. So you split up the individuals into the 2 teams, and they're in 2 lines, and they're all holding hands with each other. Now, you also have to, because I don't know, the kids taught me this, but if you hold your hand like this, it's a pancake. But if you intermingle or intertwine your fingers, it's a waffle. So I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
They were talking about waffles. They were talking about pancakes and waffles one night, and I was like, man, I thought we're playing a game, but I found out later on what they were talking about. But you're in those 2 lines, and everybody's eyes are closed. And so at one end of the line, you might have a stool, or you might just have anything. It could be a chair, whatever you have, and you just put an object on there, whatever object you have. We typically use a water bottle, but we've used paper towels. We've also, I think, used We may have even used a pillow before or a shoe. And you just have that object on one end, but they're all holding hands. On the other end is typically where I stand. And those two individuals on the far end have their eyes opened, and I'm flipping a quarter. So I flip a quarter and then I flip it on my wrist. And once I reveal whether it's heads or tails, if it's heads, they're supposed to squeeze the next person in line. So when that person feels the squeeze from their hand, they squeeze the next person. So it's like a chain reaction all the way down, and the first team to grab the object would win. The issue or the problem that happens is if you accidentally squeeze on tails, then you actually lose 2 points. So you can gain 1 point or you can lose 2 points, because you have some of those kids that think they're smarter than the game, and they're like, well, we'll just take our 50-50 chances. And they find out really quickly, oh no, this isn't working out for us. We're losing 2 spots every time we get it wrong. Mm-hmm. So, and the way that the game works, so that way everyone gets a chance at being in the front or being in the back, is once you get it correct, the person who grabbed the object then goes to the front of the line. And the goal is to get your whole team one way through. That's right. And so instead of kind of like points, what you do is you go 1 rotation forward if you get it right. But if you get it wrong, you go 2 rotations back. So the 2 people at the front go to the back. And it's been a blast, a fun game. I think that game has gone viral a couple of times on TikTok because they think we're praying. And then they're like, some people, what are they doing? Yeah. So that was a good game. That's very easy prep. The kids seem to enjoy it. And, that's one of those games that anybody can really play or close to, because you're just standing there. And we've had some people, who've been on a chair before, and they're sitting in a chair because it's really just an impulse thing, and you're just squeezing hands. So if you can squeeze a hand, you can play the game. And I have found out that when we let the adults play, the kids don't really like it, because I guess the reflexes seem to slow down and the youth let them know. They're like, we found where the chain reaction is slow at. So if you're an adult and you're playing that game, you might just want to make sure that you have pretty good impulses.
And that's one too, that you could have a youth who can't play, or like they could be the one flipping, or wanted to be involved, flip the coin, or watch the line or whatever like that too. So
yeah, that's another perfect game for that. Another one, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but we call it Empire, and that's where you're typically in a room, and we like to do this one more on like a Sunday morning, or if the kids maybe are dressed up a little bit nicer, kind of deal, because this game doesn't actually involve standing up or moving around or running as much. It's more strictly a mind game. What we do is we hand out little pieces of paper, and you can do scratch paper or whatever, and you each give them a little piece of paper, and you tell them to write down on that piece of paper a Disney character that they would like to be, or just any Disney character. And so they'll write a Disney character. You can choose whatever theme, but we've just found that Disney has been just an easy go-to. And they'll write a Disney character and they fold it up. Well, then I will announce all the names that I have in my hand that every child has written down. And basically no one else knows what anybody wrote. And you take turns. So let's say I'll point on somebody, they'll take a turn. They'll say, all right, well, I think, Joe is Tinkerbell. Well, if Joe is Tinkerbell, he says yes, then he joins the individual who guessed his name correctly on his team. If he gets it wrong, it's now Joe's turn to guess someone else in the room. And the goal is to build your empire up until you're the last empire standing. And the reason what makes it, I guess, more of a team game is since I only say the names one time, later on in the game, people are like, wait, what are all the other names? And all of a sudden you need your empire to be like, no, remember there's Lightning McQueen. Remember, I know there's a Lightning McQueen still there. And that's where it starts off individual, and then all of a sudden it becomes a team. And that's an easy, no prep game. You can make it happen anywhere, and it's not that physical. That's another go-to. And they seem to really like that game. We've played that game so many times, and it's so simple and quick. Now that's a game that won't go viral on TikTok though, because there's not much action. But the kids really do enjoy that game. And I guess since you asked for 3, I'll give you one that is more physical. So that way, for those who are
balance.
That's right. Maybe have a gym, or maybe you can go outside, and you don't need anything special with it. All you will need is basically like a kickball or a volleyball, one of those 2 types of balls. And we use 2 trash cans. So typically, at a church, you'll have a trash can. I mean, I hope you have a trash can. If not, you might not need to be playing games. You might need to go to the store and get a trash can. But if you have 2 trash cans, you just set them up on 2 ends of the field or of the gym. And basically you split up into 2 teams, and you have that kickball or volleyball. And what you do is you pass it to a teammate, and they can only take 2 steps. So when they take 2 steps, they have to either pass it to another individual, or they have to try and shoot at the goal. And it's typically a pretty fast-paced game. And for the defenders, all they have to do is hit the ball on the ground and it's change of possession. So once the ball either hits the ground or the ball is intercepted, then it's change of possession and it's the other team's ball and they're trying to go score. And again, the reason we like the two-step rule is it causes the individuals to pass the ball. Mm-hmm. And we also put a limit on you can't hold the ball for more than 5 seconds. So it's a fast-paced game. Everyone's getting involved. Usually when you play it, you don't have many people who never get the ball because you have to pass it to somebody. And, sometimes it ends up just being an individual really close to you. But that's a really easy game that almost anybody can play. And if you want to start making it even more intense is you start adding a couple different balls. So you might be playing with 3 balls. And so for the trash cans, you can have a defender who's guarding the trash cans. So typically we do 1 or 2, but you set the boundaries beyond the trash can. So technically you can go behind your goal, kind of like lacrosse, and it adds that new element that's like, oh, cool, there is strategy. We got to pass the ball around, or maybe we need to wait till a second ball to try and score. But it's fun because you'll have a goalie who's, running around the trash can the best that they can to block it. And what's crazy and ends up happening, typically one of the most tired players is the goalie by the end of the game. And the other players are running down the field and the goalie's over there saying, we need a break, time out. But that's an easy game too. It doesn't take much. And you can always change variations for if your kids like soccer, maybe you do more of dribbling the ball with the soccer and then picking it up, whatever you want to do it. But they really like the way of just throwing it and change of possession once it hits the ground. I know there's some variations of that game, but man, that's one of them games when we go back for senior memories. That's one of them games that the kids say, we call it speedball. They say speedball is the game, but that's also one that can get competitive. So
yeah. Well, and we've done something similar with, even if you do have a gym and you have basketball goals, we've played the same type of game where you can, where the basketball goal is the goal, or we've used the trash can. And that's one of the things I think I would encourage, and you can probably jump in on this too, is if you want to do a game, you can look at it and you can vary that for your, whatever your gym or your space or, place is. But you're just kind of, or adjusting it for your kids. You may not have to have a 2-step rule with your youth group, but you may have to. And so one of the things that I found, or 2 main things I found, one is when you're creating games, like make up the rules as you go, like change a rule. If you see something that's going to help, we did toilet paper dodgeball one time, and this is definitely not a no prep game. So it was just dodgeball, and same rules as dodgeball. If you catch it, you drop it, then you're out. If you catch it, the other person's out. So it's really fun because you get this whole like night. We did a black light, and so you had this is definitely not the no prep or no prep, no prop. But you have dodgeball going on. I see you're taking notes here. And so toilet paper going and everything. But then I also invoked the wrath of God rule, which means that anytime I could point at somebody and I could say, you're out or you're in, no questions asked. And so some kid would catch it. The kid is pegging everybody. I just be like, all right, you're out. That's not fair. They go off to the side. Or some little kid hit it and drops it and they're all yelling, you're out. I'm like, no, you're still in. And so really we kind of got to where it got to this, like they were mad at me and they were mad at each other. And then I said, all right, let's talk about justice and fairness.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it kind of created that discussion. But I have many times in other games made up rules. Okay, you can only step so far. All the guys use your left hand or your opposite hand. Any of those type things. So I would encourage. Have you found that to be true with what you do? Do you have the adjust things like that on the fly to help the game flow?
Oh yeah. If you are not willing to adjust as a youth minister, you will run into some issues real quick. It seems like there's always adjustments, but one of the things that when you said there, I thought was cool is how you incorporated some sort of a lesson that could go with the game. So a lot of times, like even the games I said right there, those may not be games that have lessons attached to it, but there was a game when you said that we did, and the lesson that was attached to it, man, it went a long ways. Cause I know a lot of the kids, came back and were like, wow, I heard what you said when you were teaching. I knew what you meant when you said to apply it. But then whenever we played that game, and I didn't realize I was even making the mistakes that you were just now talking about, it says it was eye-opening. And what it was is we were talking, the game was, it was a very simple game. It was, you go out to the store, and this is, you have to prep a little bit. You can use maybe a puzzle, but I found a Lego to be the best thing. You buy one of those, $5 to $10, probably about a $10 Lego, $10 to $15, and you have the Legos and you have all the pieces at one table, And then at another table, which is probably about 15 feet away, is you have the instruction book. And what you do is it's kind of like a relay race. You let one individual go to the instruction book, you let them sit for about 30 seconds. Then that person goes to the next table to start putting it together while the next person goes to the instruction table. So the whole time the people at the table are trying to build this Lego object based off the instructions that they don't have, but they got to see, 30 seconds earlier, and they're trying their best to build it. And when the next person comes, they're trying to figure out where the person left off. And they're also trying to figure out where am I at in the instructions. And they played the game and they struggled with it and they were frustrated. They didn't realize how difficult it was to put together a Lego that said ages 5 and up. And, these people were 18 years old, they were struggling, and 16, 17, 18 years old, and they were frustrated. And then when we got back in the youth room and I told them about, I can't remember exactly where we're at in scripture, but I think it may have been in regards to just following God's voice or following his commands in life. And then you might have peace. What I was basically told them, I said, that's what we do a lot of times. We study so intently when we have the book in front of us. We come to youth group and we're so invested. We're writing notes down and we're eating it up and we're loving it and we feel like we're digesting it. But once we leave the scriptures, once we leave Bible study and we go to actually apply it and put together the pieces or put it into action, into the life, I said, we get frustrated because we left the instructions at the table. And I try to tell them all the time, you have got to take what you are reading, what you are learning, what God is showing you with your life when you go to apply it. And I said, that's going to be the big game changer. And some of them kids were just like, oh man, that's crazy. Like, it all makes sense now. Because you can sometimes get into a rut and don't even realize it as a youth. And you can get really good at taking notes in youth group or looking very involved on Wednesday nights. And then all of a sudden at school, these individuals who are so impactful on youth nights don't have much of a witness or a light when they're at school. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like they need a little bit of a recheck. And typically it's usually because they've grown up in church or they've just gotten used to the pattern of what it looks like to be right with God and not actually practice it. And then all of a sudden those kids are like, wow, wait a second. I actually need to be doing exactly what I'm doing in youth group when I'm at school, when I'm at home. Like, I can't just make this an intent thing when I have, the youth leader here and my youth friends. It was a pretty cool game, I guess, looking back, because, and you have those moments here and there with some of those games, but I also try my best not to make every game, because sometimes kids are like, oh, come on, and it doesn't really have an impact. But when it seems to fit with what the lesson you're doing, and just the way that the kids are interacting with you. And typically a youth minister will know that based off of where their youth are at. When you have that open line of communication, you can kind of start to see, hey, I kind of been struggling when it comes to at school, like I'm doing a fine job when I'm here at youth group, but when I'm at school, I seem to struggle, in these areas. Then you're kind of like, all right, well, look, you just played that game. And let me tell you, in that game, this is what happened, and it was a cool thing. And we have a lot of games that sometimes, have some of those ties, but sometimes they don't. But when you said that, I remember so vividly some of those kids being like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So.
And like you said, it's not always going to happen, and it can be intentional. Sometimes it's unintentional. You can go, hey, remember back when we were playing this or when we did this and you worked together or something like that. And so a lot of times you do have those unintentional things. I've had kids put things together before. But I think part of that also goes to, like you said, you're buying time with those relationships. When you're playing that game, when you both get put out, you and the seventh grader both get put out by the same guy in dodgeball, and you're sitting on the corner side talking, like, man, that was tough. But that's a relationship that you'll always have. Or when you have the picture of everybody with all the color powder on their face, or Bud Wars, or whatever that is.
That's right.
Those so games do two things. One, they provide those actual sermon illustrations, those actual life illustrations. And then they give you those times that you can, put those things together that they put together on their own, and that just relationship stuff.
Right.
And those are some of my favorite things with doing was leading games. I don't get to do it as often anymore because now I'm a lead pastor and I don't get the youth. But one of the things I would encourage you and anybody else listening is don't keep the games just to the youth. And so we do a Winter Olympics, and we did the Winter Olympics for many years. We get the old bobsled, like the car sled, automotive creepers, and we do bobsled, and we do luge, and we do putting your feet on pieces of paper and you scoot along, and that's the skating. And so you have to do the race all the way around the track. And I did it with youth for many years, probably 6 or 7 years. We did it with youth. And when I moved here, I said, hey, could we do this with the adults? And we had a blast.
Wow.
And I had 70-year-olds on automotive creepers being pushed around, and I'm worried. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen if somebody gets hurt? And we did figure skating, and it actually got the entire church involved. And so sometimes don't just do games for youth, but have the youth group sponsor. Our youth does a softball tournament. It's youth versus kids softball, because the same games and the same connections and the same points you talk about making with students, you can make those with students and their parents. You can make those with students and their grandparents, or the Sunday school class at the church that is just like the youth are over here and they're over here. It's a way to make those connections as well. And so, all right, well, one game I want to share, you may not have heard of. Have you played 13?
I have not played 13.
Okay, so this is truly, I told you no prep, no prop, and you still use a few preps and props, but this is truly no prop. And this can be done in groups. I would probably start 7 or 8. You can do larger if you want, but we did, the whole thing is you count to 13. So if I start, I say 1, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3. You can say 1 number, 2 numbers, 3 numbers. And the next person goes 4, 5. The next person goes 6, 7, 8. And the next person goes 9, 10, 11. Well, if you say the number 13, you're out.
Oh,
so your goal is to say the number 12. And so you start off with a bunch, and it's really kind of, random people get out, but then you get down to the 3, and you're trying to figure out what the number. And because y'all are youth leaders listening to this, and because I want you to succeed, I will tell you this: the person that says number 8 can always win when it's 2 people. So if you say 8, the next person can only say 9, 10, 11, then you can say 12, 13. So if you say 8, then you can always win. But that's just a simple no prep. That's for driving the van, you can play that. On an airplane, waiting for planes or waiting for a concert to start. And so there's a lot of those little games too that, and I'll share some, and some links to some game things that I have from my years. And then that was something I was going to ask: are there places that you typically go and find games to play?
So really, I think it just had to do with, I was one of 7 in my house. And we just played games all the time. So a lot of the games have just been from my older brothers, my older sisters. So I can't think of too many sources. Now, a lot of times TikTok is a good source when it comes to when you're just scrolling through there and you're seeing these youth groups and they're playing games. I'll see some of those games and I'll play it. But actually, like a website or anything, I don't know too many other sources, but TikTok, Instagram. And when I'm sure other youth ministers have this too, is the parents at their church, hey, look, I saw this, what about doing this? Or even you have a kid come up and be like, look, we have to do this. So really a lot of the resources have funneled back into me, and I haven't had to do too much outward seeking, I guess. But I want to have came across the 13 if I want to have done this. And that's going to be an easy, that's a gimme game that I know the kids are going to really love.
Yeah. So I have a post I did, those 3 socially distanced games. So that's one you can play without having any deal. Whoosh ball was the other one, and I'll put that up there. But it's no balls. You're just going like this, like you pass it across the room like this, like whoosh, or you can throw the ball to either side of you. It's an imaginary ball, but it's just keeping that kind of like, did you do the right symbol, the right hand gesture with that? And it is an elimination game, but and both those are. But sometimes those aren't bad to do. I'll tell you the one big fun game that we did for camps, really camps and retreats, works better, is you send everybody to their cabin or their place, and every group gets a pillow sack or a pillowcase, and they put whatever they want to in the pillowcase. It's hair dryers, combs, gums, toys, stuffed toys. And then I have a list of items, and we call it reverse scavenger hunt. And so they're all sitting in the room wherever they are, and I'll get like 4 or 5 people. You have Jerry over here, or you have, Sarah over here. Like, okay, the first group to bring a stuffed baby Yoda to Sarah, and they all search through and they find and they run across. Or the first group to bring a comb to John, or a 1950 something or earlier penny to somebody. And so they're keeping points. And I had one of my former youth, who's now a youth director on her own, and we were playing that game, and she was kind of a counselor, and we sat down with her group, and she said, all right, everybody we need a shoelace taken out of your shoes. And we need somebody to take a belt off and find it, because she knew the list I had. So she was already, they said, I'll look over her group and they're taking the shoelaces out. They're lining everything up and setting everything up because she knows what I'm going to pull.
Wow.
But it was a good, fun, and again, you have the group that are working together. They go to their cabin and find things together. They come back and they're working together. And yeah, somebody wins, but they're all participating throughout the whole thing. And so that reverse scavenger hunt, I'll share that as well. But do you have some games either written down or online or anything like that you could share, or would you put together maybe a few for us that we could share in a post?
Yeah, I definitely could do that. A lot of times on TikTok, if you go on my TikTok account, you could see pretty much all the games on there. And usually the way that most games you can play, you can kind of figure out what they're doing. And you can sometimes see in the comments, because I'll message people back how to play it, kind of deal. But yeah, if you need me to write something up, I definitely can.
You send some of those. And then, so you talk about TikTok kind of brings me to my final deal is we have people who are listening to this and they may find you on TikTok or whatever. What's the best way to communicate with you, to find you, to ask somebody, if somebody sees a game and they're like, hey, how do you play this? And do you have, Instagram Messenger or email, or what's the best way to connect with you?
So I think the best way, if I don't know you, is probably Facebook Messenger, the way that you did it. And then the other way is Instagram Messenger, because as of now, TikTok's direct message thing is a little bit, it's spotty and it doesn't really work well because you have to both be following each other kind of deal. I don't know if they're going to fix that. So really it's Instagram and the Facebook, and that's the best way to communicate.
And what are those for those who are, if I mistype it?
For the Facebook, you pretty much just type in my name, which would be James Daniel Schopp. For Instagram, it's actually our youth group's Instagram. So it's Sandy Creek Youth Group. You just type that in and you'll find us on there. And then on TikTok, it's James_Daniel11. And then we also have, which usually we don't really describe our games, but just because of what the youth had asked for, whenever someone couldn't attend a Bible study, they would ask to put it on podcast. So that's strictly why we do this podcast thing. But we've also have seen, kind of like you said, all of a sudden some of them will seem to do very well, and I guess it just depends on when the word gets out. And that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and it's called No Excuse. Or you can also just type in my name, James Daniel Schopp, and it pops up, and it has a little juice box. Now we did keep that the same. We have a juice box for TikTok and a juice box for the podcast. And the reason we did the juice box is I joked with the youth. I said, look, we're going to be #1 globally with a hashtag. And they were like, what are you talking about? I said, the juice box. And then they were like, what's going on? And so it's quite funny. The kids, I think, enjoy it. But if you ever go on TikTok and you just type in the hashtag and you put the little emoji, that's a little juice box, then all of our videos pop up. So, and then we're #1 up there. So I tell them, look, we're globally ranked #1 for the juice box. So if you see the juice box, it might just be our youth group.
Well, that's a great little extra tip as far as, on marketing and identity and such like that, and to find that. So, well, James Daniel, this has been a great conversation with you, and I would love to talk with you again sometime in the future and do this again. And maybe if I find my way out there, I'll find my way to Sandy Creek Baptist. Any final thoughts you have or encouragements for youth leaders?
Well, I guess since, we're trying to keep it strictly to games, because, I could have talked about so many different things. I really tried hard because I listened to some of your other podcasts, and you always ask me like, all right, well, stick to this, try the best. And so I tried to. But, when it comes to games, if you're a youth minister and you're having issues with whether, games are the right way to go or not, just know that they do play a very vital role. And, you might get a comments initially in regards to, man, is all y'all do is play games. If that really is the case, I encourage you to ask that individual, because they're typically a part of your church, and be like, look, you might just be coming and seeing the game because we play at last, but why don't you come to youth group from beginning to end? And then you'll get a full picture. Every individual that I've ever had who made a comment like that, who came after they went through the whole youth group session, have said, wow, never mind. Like, I understand now, full support. Here you go. It's just that transparency. So if you want games to be important in your ministry, make sure you have that availability to be transparent with your whole youth service, and encourage them to come see it from beginning to end. Because on TikTok, you just see games, but if you're part of the youth group, it's so much more than just a game. So that's the little encouragement I can think of.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And a reminder to everybody else, again, if you've enjoyed this, click like, subscribe. The podcast we're on, you're obviously listening to it on podcast, but you may be on YouTube. So you can listen to it either on podcast sites or on YouTube. And I encourage you to listen to either one because, we're great and my background's messy. And you can go see my messy background on YouTube. But there is some different interaction you get that way. So YouTube, podcast, and also at Talk Student Men's on all your socials. And we'll look forward to seeing y'all next time.